Well, yeah.
Look, you very good points. You talk about it not just being the U.S., it not just being the Middle East. This is all over the world, and I want to move on and talk about some of this because we've got stories from country after country after country this week about major protests or even governments falling. Let's move east into Asia, into the Himalayas, and look at the country of Nepal, where this week protests fanned by dissatisfaction over the government's ban on several popular social media platforms soon snowballed into a wider discourse on corruption and unemployment as Generation Z, people in their teens and 20s, took to the streets with banners and slogans. At least 51 people were killed and more than 1,300 were injured in the nationwide protests that erupted after the government tried to shut down social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, causing deep anger to boil over. Now, that anger had already been there, and this social media thing was kind of the last straw. So, protests turned violent as security forces used live bullets, tear gas, and batons, while demonstrators toppled barricades, looted businesses, and set fire to government offices and politicians' residence. The prime minister and 4 of his ministers resigned last week, and the military took over the capital, immediately enforcing a nationwide curfew. So after Mr. Ali, the now former prime minister, resigned, and the exodus of senior political figures left a power vacuum, activists took to Discord to plan their next steps, according to NDTV. This outlet reported that one server with more than 145,000 members hosted a debate about who could be an interim leader. Over the week, multiple polls were held by representatives of the protest movement on the platform to nominate possible leaders, and they wound up choosing 73-year-old Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice, who would be the first woman to lead the country. She will assume a caretaker role until elections in March of 2026. D, thoughts on Nepal?
People can only take so much. And apparently that's how strong social media is. You threaten to take it away, and oh my gosh, look what happened here when we passed a law to get rid of TikTok because it's spying on everybody. Well, so let them spy. Your choice. You can download it and have them look at your stuff, and that's okay too. But there's a law in the books of that, and it's not being enforced. This is exactly why. I know that my grandkids' generation would go nuts if you took their stuff away like that, because that's how they communicate now. It's how I communicate now. If I want to talk to anybody, it's how you communicate. So,
hell, look, they're governing by Discord now.
Right. Well, okay.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't like Discord so well, but oh well. But it's again.
It is what you make of it.
It's who profits off this. Okay, think about it that way. And also, just like what's going on most everywhere in the world, try standing in their shoes and then see how you would feel, and you can often understand how these things break out and how they happen. And of course, one person does it, the next person does it, next thing you have a riot. So it's unfortunate, but it's a symbol, I think, of what's going on in the world. And I think it also is in good part thanks to the unrest here. Places around the world are feeling a little more able to raise hell because the whole vacuum. We've been a leader, and look at what's going on here. And so there's really is a vacuum, I think.
Yeah, well, let's stay in Asia and move a little further east to the Philippines, where we found out, and this is from ABC News, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s administration have been investigating alleged substandard and non-existent flood control projects in separate televised inquiries. Dozens of legislators, senators, construction companies, and public works engineers were identified and accused of pocketing huge kickbacks that financed lavish lifestyles and high-stakes casino gambling. This corruption scandal has been especially sensitive in the poverty-stricken Southeast Asian country that is prone to deadly typhoons and floodings that devastate entire towns and villages multiple times each year. So, the Philippines have spent an estimated 545 billion pesos, that's a little less than $10 billion, for thousands of flood mitigation projects in the last 3 years. The projects were under government review to determine which ones are substandard or non-existent, as Marcos said he has found during recent inspections he led in some flood-prone provinces, including Bulacan, a densely populated province north of Manila. So, what's going on here, Chris? Do you have comments on what looks to be like massive government corruption in the Philippines? And, where does the buck stop in that situation?
You know what? I mean, I don't. It's obvious corruption, I think, like in plain terms right there. I don't know a good amount about, the structure of the Philippine government and everything like that. But it would make sense that it's like, it seems like an easy avenue for corruption because like it's the Philippines, like there's going to be floods, there's going to be all of this, like it makes sense to go and put like social money towards those projects, right? So if you're just a citizen in the Philippines right now, it's like, oh, we're protecting against flood damage, like that sounds great, like this is supposed to happen. So I think what the glaring thing for me was just the ease, like the ability for corruption to take place when it looks like everything they're doing it for a good cause, kind of, right? And it's just the susceptibility of people and their trust in the overall government that they will do things for them. And we should expect that from all of our governments, that they're going to do right by us, and a lot of the times they don't. So I think that's like the naivety, but like it's a forced naivety, like of citizens to their government, that their government is going to try to protect them and do right by them, right? Like that shouldn't be a question, but obviously it is so many places, and it's just completely taking advantage of their citizens and what they think they're getting.
Yeah, and this dynamic, shouldn't seem foreign to us. It sounds like, you've got the rich elites pocketing public money and not using it for public purposes. And, I think we've got a pretty significant problem like that in this country ourselves. So, relatable, very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to Europe and look at France. So now, if you recall, a couple years ago, they had those big yellow vest protests. There's been bubbling unrest in France for a few years now. Well, Wednesday, a day of anti-government action across the country, saw streets choked with smoke, barricades in flames, and volleys of tear gas as protesters denounced budget cuts and political turmoil from the Associated Press. The nationwide Bloquons Tout, or Block Everything campaign, presented a challenge to President Emmanuel Macron and turned Sébastien Lecornu's first day as prime minister into a baptism of fire. So, this is the new prime minister's first day. Sorry, where are we? There we are. So, just Monday, the old Prime Minister, François Bayrou, lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament. Macron appoints this new guy, Lecornu, and folks are not terribly happy with this. So one student, Baptiste Sagot, 21, says, one prime minister has just been ousted, and straight away we get another one from the right. They're trying to make working people, young students, retirees, all people in difficulty, bear all the effort instead of taxing wealth. Kurt, Now, I don't know if you know about the Yellow Vest protests that they had a couple years ago. Those were widely regarded as sort of a right-wing populist protest. And here you have sort of like left-wing populist protests. Does this sort of mirror what's happening in the U.S. too, as you see the sort of center consensus falling apart with attacks from the populist outside?
So they're placing the burden on the working man and reducing taxes to the rich and not. I mean, I don't see how that's like what we're doing here.
Well,
I'm being sarcastic. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a mirror image. I mean, this is what, right wing conservatism, whatever you want to call it. It's creating problems in many countries across the world right now, and that's why I think you're seeing so many protests taking place. I mean, just like the story you just talked about. What was the guy's name? If anybody knows anything about the Marcos family, I mean, was that not expected to happen? And the thing that's going on in here, when you take one piece of crap out of office and you put another one in, how do you think the people are going to respond? And I don't want to call them fascists or whatever, but when people of power like this try to control the public, they don't see a problem with that. They don't look at that as being an issue. But when the people protest against that and take to the streets, that's a problem. And this is what's happening, not only here, but we see in other countries. And I don't know what the end game is going to be. I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime. And that's what scares the hell out of me, is because this is something that, how long is this going to go on? What's it going to take to stop this kind of rich man good, poor man bad type attitude? Because that's basically what it is. In our country here alone, it's everybody talks about entitlement programs and everything, and they expect the burden to be placed on the working man, and they continue to raise the cost. They want to make us poor. They want to control us, and the same thing's happening in Nepal and in France and in other places across the world. The protests in Nepal, they took away their social media. Well, I'm not familiar with, but how is their media controlled? Their regular media, are they giving actual media to the people, or did the people react this way because Facebook and Instagram is their only avenue to receive outside information or world information and news? I don't know those facts. So, but the situation in France, I mean, this is Europe has a fire burning on both ends of the country, and it's going to come together somewhere. And it's just,
well, we're talking about the sort of the center not holding, right? The rules-based order and like global capitalism is what we're talking about. Like the neoliberal era. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, he's a neoliberal, very much the way like Biden or Clinton or George W. Bush or Reagan. The way that general kind of concept has dominated the world for the last 40, 50 years. It's falling apart, and it's falling apart from both sides. And we see, in France, the right and the left are both tired of it. In this country, the right and the left are both tired of it. And we see elsewhere in Europe, a lot of this upset with the system, and there are plenty of reasons to be upset with the neoliberal global order, but a lot of it is being pushed by Russia, and you see that in a place like Slovakia, which also had massive protests this week, where thousands gathered in the capital of Bratislava on Thursday to protest a meeting between their Prime Minister Robert Fico and Russian President Vladimir Putin in an escalation of previous protests against Fico's pro-Russia stance. So, this latest wave of protests were fueled by a trip by Fico to China, where he again met with Putin and other authoritarian leaders. He traveled to Beijing for that military parade last week we talked about. He was the only head of a European country the only head of an EU country, rather, to attend the event, where he discussed bilateral relations with Putin. A recent plan for, here we are, austerity measures, like we talked about in these other countries, presented by the government, is set for debate on Friday and was another target of the protesters' ire. So this Fico guy has long been a divisive figure in Slovakia and beyond. Now, he returned to power for the fourth time after his nominally leftist party, Smer, or Direction, won the 2023 parliamentary election after campaigning on a pro-Russia and anti-American message. He has openly challenged the EU's policies over Ukraine, while his critics have charged that Slovakia, under Fico, is following the direction of Hungary under Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is regarded by many as an autocrat. D, you have any thoughts on Slovakia?
Well, sure. But I think that, you talked about austerity, and did I ask today who profits?
Yep. Once or twice.
It's not the people who are experiencing the austerity that profit, okay? They're the ones that are paying the profits to those who are getting them. There's a reason that the oligarchs and the dictators of the world are the richest people, because they're extracting the money out of those who earn it with their labor and pay for it, and they disappear with it. And, you'd think that they'd go lay on a beach somewhere, but oh no, that power kind of goes to the head a little bit. And you think, well, if I just get a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and they just keep at it. In the meantime, it's like a leech. You can't bleed somebody only so much. They run out of blood. And so people are not going to be happy. The less and less that they see that they have, while the people on top are living in gold-plated houses and stuff. That's not democracy, first of all, but it's also what will cause even people that think they have no power to come together. People together have power.
Yes. So, finally, in Europe, another country experiencing some internal turmoil, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić is escalating his crackdown on protests that have shaken his populist rule in recent months. What began as a small student-led campaign against corruption has snowballed into one of the most turbulent protest waves in the Balkan country in a quarter of a century. Last week, tanks rolled through Belgrade in preparation for a military parade on September 20th. If the parade becomes a flashpoint for unrest, protesters feared the military could remain on the streets. This Vučić guy has ruled Serbia for more than a decade, reshaping its politics while drawing accusations of corruption and authoritarianism again. He began his political career in the 90s as a hardline nationalist in the Serbian Radical Party, becoming information minister under the late war criminal Slobodan Milosevic. He was notorious for his calls to punish independent media and his wartime rhetoric against Serbia's neighbors, which he maintains to this day. If you recall, last November, a canopy collapsed at a railway station in the northern city of Novi Sad, killing at least 16 people. Protesters have been demanding accountability, transparency, and early elections since. European Union officials have warned Vučić that progress toward EU membership depends on meeting certain standards, including reforms in the judiciary, media freedoms, and the fight against corruption. At a time when Europe is dealing with the repercussions of Russia's war in Ukraine, the EU has so far shown little willingness to confront Vučić and his government. Chris, any thoughts on Serbia and Vucic and that country's internal turmoil?
I'm actually going to pass on this one because I really have to go to the bathroom and I cannot think before going. So I will be right back, but I'll be here to answer about Russia. So I'll be back.
Absolutely. We're going to let Chris walk for a second. And in the meantime, Kurt, do you have any thoughts about Vucic and Serbia, or is it just the same story again, right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate we're talking about all these, but all you're doing is just interjecting different country names and different leaders' names, and it's the same old story. This is what's happening,
right?
Globally. So, it's people are protesting, people are pissed off, and I'm not trying to fearmonger or anything, but the world's on fire, and there's going to be a head that comes to it at some point in time, and people need to pay attention. It's this is the only way we have. This is the only power that people have when you have oligarchs and just fascists and dictators and rulers who just think they can do whatever the hell they want to do. The only thing that people can do is to fight back, is to protest. And then when we are the ones that are criminalized for it and pointed to and said, you're the problem, and we roll tanks through it. I mean, they're rolling tanks through the city. You said, where does that sound like? LA. Wow. Threats of Chicago, DC. I mean, that's what's happening in our country. We're taking our military weaponry and rolling it into our cities because we don't like the fact that people are protesting. And for the most part, the protests are not violent, and they're peaceful. Okay. A lot of the violence that has occurred, like in Indiana, back in the No Kings March, the only violent incident that occurred was in Lafayette when a dude jumped out of his truck with a rifle and walked up to the protesters. That was the only case of violence that occurred on that day. So, but they're suppressing people and taking away their right to speak. They don't like it. Fascists don't like to be questioned. They like obedience. And when the populace questions them, it makes them uneasy. And the only thing that they know to do to try to retaliate, instead of maybe changing policies and making things a little bit better for people, is to use their military and to show their might, because that's who they are, and that's the simplicity of their way they think. I mean, most of the problems that are caused in these countries are because of the policies that these governments have made, and that includes us here. You don't fight crime by showing a mass military force. That's not how you do it. That incites people. That's not how you do it. You create policies. You create avenues for people to seek help and to educate people. But we're doing the exact opposite, and I'm sure it's happening in a lot of these countries. They're taking away. We can't rely on statistics here anymore because of what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
We can't rely on proper information because it's being held from us. If the numbers come out and they don't like them, well, we're going to change that. And I'm sure this is happening in these countries around the world. I mean, it's scary times, and I try to pay attention to globally, but there's so much here that we have to pay attention to that. Hey, some of it slips through because there's I can't even keep track of everything here, and that is that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.